Xi Jinping is hosting Donald Trump at the centerpiece event in their two-day summit in Beijing, toasting each other and the relationship between their two countries. The venue is the Great Hall of the People, the two leaders making a show of friendship. But the superpower rivalry appears to be emerging over two key issues, Iran and Taiwan.
Something extraordinary just happened in Beijing, and most people have no idea how much it could reshape the next decade. Welcome to Global Sketch, where we break down the world's biggest events so that anyone can understand them. If this is your first time here,
为世界带来更多和平、繁荣、进步。
Today, President Trump and I had in-depth exchanges on China-US relations and international and regional dynamics. We both believe that the China-US relationship is the most important bilateral relationship in the world. We must make it work and never mess it up. Both China and the United States stand to gain from cooperation and lose from confrontation. Our two countries should be partners rather than rivals.
We had extremely positive and productive conversations and meetings today with the Chinese delegation earlier, and this evening is another cherished opportunity to discuss among friends some of the things that we discussed today, all good for the United States and for China, and it was a great honor to be with you.
hit that subscribe button right now, because we cover the stories that actually matter today. May 14, 2026, the most important diplomatic meeting of this decade just kicked off. U.S. President Donald Trump walked into the Great Hall of the People in Beijing to sit face-to-face with Chinese President Xi Jinping. This is Trump's first visit to China since 2017, nearly a decade, and the world is watching every single word. Let's get into why this summit is a much bigger deal than the headlines suggest. Section 1. The scene and what IT signals when Air Force One landed at Beijing Capital International Airport. Trump was greeted with a full military honor guard, a brass band, and children waving American and Chinese flags. That wasn't just ceremony, that was a political statement. China wanted the world to see the Xi Jinping walk down the stairs of the Great Hall to personally greet Trump, a gesture that carries deep symbolic weight in Chinese diplomatic culture. Accompanying Trump on this trip, a who's who of American business power: Elon Musk of Tesla, Tim Cook of Apple, Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, who actually joined the delegation last minute during a stopover in Alaska, and BlackRock CEO Larry Fink and Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg. These aren't tourists, their presence signals that this summit was always about economics as much as politics. Here's a critical data point. The US and China together account for roughly 43% of global GDP when these two powers sit down. The other 195 countries on Earth hold their breath. Trade question: deals, soybeans, and Boeing ***. So what's actually on the table? Going into the summit, the White House made clear it was pushing for China to buy more American goods, specifically soybeans, Boeing aircraft, beef, and oil. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told reporters to expect large and growing orders and confirmed that soybean negotiations are all taken care of. Here's the backstory. After Trump launched his so-called Liberation Day tariffs in April 2025, China hit back hard and hit back smart. Beijing weaponized its dominance over rare earth minerals, the critical elements needed for everything from semiconductors to electric vehicles to fighter jets that sent shockwaves through Washington, and directly led to a temporary trade truce at the APEC summit in South Korea last October 2025. China's economy, despite those tariffs, expanded by 5% in 2025, better than almost every forecast. Chinese exporter pivoted to markets outside the U.S., and Beijing's push for tech self-sufficiency in chips and advanced manufacturing started paying off. China is not the same economic pressure point it was in 2017. Analysts at CSIS put it plainly: China comes into this meeting far more confident than before now. Both sides have agreed to work toward a constructive China-US relationship of strategic stability. Language the Chinese side says will serve as the guiding framework for the next 3 years and beyond. Harvard professor Graham Allison, who literally wrote the book on US-China tensions, predicted on CNBC that the temporary tariff truce could formalize into a real agreement. He even raised the possibility of China announcing up to $1 trillion in American goods purchases. That would be a headline-defining number. The Iran wildcard Hormuz holds the world hostage. Here's the issue that completely overshadows the trade talks, and most people aren't fully connecting the dots. The United States and Israel launched strikes against Iran on February 28, 2026. That war is still dragging on, and the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which roughly 20% of the world's oil supply flows, is under threat. Trump came to Beijing with one very urgent ask: pressure Iran to reopen the strait and come back to the negotiating table. Why? Ask China. Because Beijing is Iran's single largest trading partner and the top buyer of Iranian oil, China has unique leverage that no other country has. Both sides publicly agreed at the summit that the Strait of Hormuz must remain open and that Iran cannot be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. She also signaled interest in purchasing more American oil, a move that would reduce China's dependence on Iranian crude and, in theory, give Beijing more freedom to push back on Tehran. But here's the catch: China is walking a tightrope. It doesn't want to be seen as doing America's dirty work, especially when Chinese public opinion is firmly against involvement. Ordinary Beijing residents told CNN reporters they want neutrality if they want to fight. That's their business, and China's official readout of the talks barely mentioned Iran at all. Just a brief line about exchanging views on the Middle East. The uncomfortable reality: China gains leverage from the Iran crisis as long as the strait remains a pressure point. Beijing has something Washington desperately needs. That's not a position China is in a hurry to give up. Taiwan, the elephant in the room. Now we get to the most explosive issue of this entire summit, one where the two countries' official readouts tell completely different stories. White House's official summary of day one talks: Taiwan is not mentioned once. Akina's official readout: Taiwan is the centerpiece. Xi Jinping delivered what analysts are calling a stark private warning to Trump that Taiwan is, quote, the most important issue in U.S.-China relations, and that if it is mishandled, it could push relations to a dangerous place, a place of collision and conflict. Chinese state media referred to Taiwan as the first red line ahead of this summit. What's the background? In December 2025, the U.S. approved an $11 billion weapons sale to Taiwan. Trump said before leaving Washington that he wouldn't shy away from discussing weapons sales, but when reporters asked him directly about Taiwan at the Temple of Heaven visit, he said nothing and walked away. China considers Taiwan a breakaway province. Taiwan's ruling government rejects that the U.S. officially acknowledges China's position but doesn't endorse it, a deliberate diplomatic ambiguity that has held for decades. The risk now is that Trump, known for going off script, could inadvertently shift that language in a direction Beijing would immediately exploit. Xi's question at the summit captured the entire tension in one phrase: can the U.S. and China avoid the Thucydides trap? That's the historical pattern where a rising power and an established power almost inevitably stumble into war. Xi's essentially asking, are we mature enough to break that pattern? What happens next? 3 predictions. So where does all of this go from here? Prediction 1. Expect a formal extension of the trade truce, likely dressed up as a major deal with big headline numbers. Trump wants a win before the midterms. China wants economic stability. Both sides have incentive to announce something big, even if the structural tensions underneath remain unresolved. Prediction 2. Iran will remain China's leverage card. Don't expect Beijing to make dramatic moves on the strait. Expect carefully worded joint statements, just enough to keep Washington engaged, not enough to anger Tehran. Prediction 3. Taiwan is the slow-burning fuse. No dramatic breakthrough here. But watch the language very carefully. Any shift in how the U.S. officially phrases its Taiwan position, even a few words, will be seized upon by Beijing as a diplomatic victor. Xi is expected to visit the United States later this year, and both leaders could meet again at APEC and G20 events. The relationship is being managed, not solved. Here's the bottom line: the Beijing summit of May 2026 is not about friendship. It's about two superpowers trying to stabilize a relationship that both know could, if mismanaged, reshape the entire global order. The smiles at the Great Hall of the People are real, but so are the fault lines underneath. As HSBC's Asia economist put it, This is a defining test for the G2 relationship to countries that together drive 43% of the world economy. Now navigating trade wars, a live military conflict, a nuclear standoff, and the most sensitive territorial dispute on the planet, this story is far from over. If you found this breakdown valuable, share it with someone who needs to understand what's really happening in the world. Subscribe to Global Sketch. We'll keep following this story as it develops.